My parents said, "You have 2 days to get out of this house." But when they thought they'd won, My mother slid a handwritten note under my bedroom door at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and the number written at the bottom was $14,200. She said, "You have 2 days to get out of this house or we change the locks." I had lived in that house for 23 years. I had helped pay for it. What nobody in my family knew yet was that I had kept every receipt. And when my parents stood in that driveway thinking they had finally gotten rid of me, they had no idea what was already in motion. If you have ever been pushed out of the one place that was supposed to be yours, stay right here. This story is for you. My name is Cora, and I need to tell you how all of this started because if I just drop you into the end, you won't feel what I felt. You won't understand why that note nearly broke me, and you won't understand why what I did next was not just justice. It was the only possible ending to a story that had been building for 6 years. I grew up in a house on Fairfield Lane in a quiet part of central Ohio. It was a 2-story house with a green front door and a big oak tree in the backyard that dropped leaves every October like clockwork. My parents, Dale and Patricia, bought that house the year I was born. I was their only child for the first 8 years of my life. Then my brother Marcus came along, and everything quietly shifted in a way I did not notice at first and could not explain later. I was the one who cooked dinner on weeknights when my mom had late shifts at the hospital where she worked in billing. I was the one who helped Marcus with his homework at the kitchen table every night until he got it right. I was the one who remembered every appointment, every school event, every due date on every bill that got left on the counter. I did not do these things to get credit. I did them because that is who I was. I was the kind of person who saw what needed to be done and did it without being asked. My dad, Dale, was a quiet man. He worked in logistics for a trucking company, and he came home tired most nights and sat in his chair and watched television until he fell asleep. He was not mean. He was not loud. He was just somewhere else even when he was in the room. He never missed Marcus's baseball games. He came to my graduation but left early because he had an early shift. I told myself it was fine. I told myself he was tired. I believed it for a long time. My mom, Patricia, was different. She had opinions about everything, and she was not quiet about them. She thought I was too serious. She thought I was too focused on school. She used to say, "Cora, you need to loosen up," and then she would laugh like it was a joke. But her eyes were not laughing. There was something in the way she looked at me sometimes, like I was a problem she had not solved yet. When I was 17, she said something that stuck in my chest like a splinter. I had just gotten accepted into the honors program at my school. I was so proud I could barely breathe. I came downstairs and told her, and she looked up from her phone and said, "Well, let's hope that helps you in the real world." Then she went back to scrolling. I stood in the kitchen for a few seconds. The refrigerator hummed. I went back upstairs. I told myself she was distracted. I told myself she was proud and just didn't know how to show it. I was very good at telling myself things that helped me stay in that house without feeling the truth of it. When I turned 18, I got a part-time job at a grocery store 3 nights a week. I was saving for college. My parents had told me they had a college fund set up for me, a thing my grandma had helped start when I was little. They called it my future money. My grandma called it a promise. She passed away when I was 15, and after she was gone, the subject of that fund came up less and less. I assumed the money was still there growing. I assumed when the time came it would be there. I worked at that grocery store for 2 years before I started college. I put away every dollar I could. I had a little notebook I kept in my dresser drawer where I tracked every dollar I saved. I wanted to be careful. I wanted to be ready. I wanted to be the kind of person who did not need to ask for help. That notebook would matter later in ways I could not have guessed. I started at a state college when I was 19, 1 year later than most of my classmates because I took a gap year to save more. I stayed home to cut costs. I commuted an hour each way. I did not complain about the drive. I was grateful. I was working toward something real and I could feel it. I was in my second year when the small moments started to add up. The first one happened on a Thursday in October. I came home from class and went to the kitchen to make dinner like I always did on weeknights. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand, and she looked up and said, "By the way, I used some of your grocery money." I stopped. I had been putting $40 a week into a little jar on the counter to cover my share of food in the house. I asked her how much. She shrugged and said, maybe $80. I needed it for Marcus's new cleats. I felt something tighten in my chest. I nodded. I said okay. I told myself it was fine. She needed it for Marcus. I could put more in next week. I put more in next week, and the week after that, I kept putting in more. The second one was harder to explain away. I was in my third year, and I had been saving for a specific thing. I had been putting money aside for a laptop that my professors were now requiring for certain labs. The one I had was 7 years old, and it kept crashing. I had saved $340 in cash in an envelope in my bottom dresser drawer. I had told no one about it because it was mine, and I was careful about things like that. One afternoon, I came home and went to my drawer for the envelope. It was not there. I searched the whole drawer. I searched the room. I went downstairs and asked my mom very calmly if she had seen an envelope in my room. She was cooking. She did not turn around. She said, I cleaned your room. I might have moved some things around. I asked if she had seen an envelope with money in it. There was a pause, a long one. Then she said, Cora, I don't know what you're talking about. I stood in the kitchen doorway. The pan on the stove was sizzling. She still had not turned around. I went back upstairs. I sat on my bed. I did not cry. I just sat very still and felt the cold of it settle into me. She took my money. She took $340 from my room, and she did not flinch. I did not confront her. I was 21 years old, and I was still under her roof, and I was still, in some part of me, hoping I had this wrong. I told myself maybe she had moved it. Maybe it fell somewhere. I looked for a week. It was gone. The third incident happened 4 months before my graduation. I was finishing my degree and I was already looking at apartments. I had done the math on what I needed to move out and I was close. I was so close. One evening I was at the kitchen table doing homework and I overheard my parents talking in the next room. The door was not fully closed. My dad's voice was low. He said something about the college fund. My mom said, she's almost done anyway. It's not like she needs it now. My dad said something I couldn't hear. Then my mom said, clear as anything, Marcus needs a car, Dale. He needs it more than she needs money she doesn't even know about. I went completely still. My hands were flat on the table. The light above me was buzzing very slightly. I could feel my own heartbeat in my ears. They used my college fund, the promise my grandmother made, the money that was supposed to be mine. They used it, and they did not tell me. I did not walk into that room. I did not say a word. I closed my notebook. I stood up slowly. I went to my bedroom and I shut the door and I sat on the floor with my back against the bed. I stared at the wall. I breathed. The oak tree outside my window moved in the wind and its shadow moved across the ceiling above me and I watched it and I breathed. I was not crying. I was thinking. That was the moment I started paying real attention. I went back through my notebook. Every dollar I had put into that jar on the counter. Every grocery run I had made for the family. Every utility bill I had paid my share of, and some months more than my share because my mom said things were tight. Every repair I had quietly helped with without being asked. I had been keeping this record for years without knowing exactly why. Some part of me always knew I needed to be careful. Some part of me always knew this day would come. I added it up. Over 4.5 years of living at home while in college, I had put $14,200 into this household. That was rent. That was food. That was utilities. That was the money that disappeared from my dresser drawer. That was the grocery jar money. That was all of it. I wrote that number at the bottom of a fresh page. I took a picture of every single page of that notebook. Then I waited. I kept my head down. I kept cooking dinner. I kept helping Marcus with his paperwork for the community college he was starting in the fall. I kept being Cora. Steady, reliable, invisible Cora. I was 6 weeks from graduation. 6 weeks from the moment I had been working toward since I was 17 years old. I had already signed a lease on a small apartment 20 minutes from campus. I was going to start a job at an environmental consulting firm 3 weeks after graduation. I had planned this down to the last detail. I just needed to get through 6 more weeks. I should have known that was too clean. The night everything broke open started on a Friday. I came home late from a study group. It was close to 10 at night. The house was lit up, and I could hear voices before I even opened the door. My mom, my dad, Marcus, and Marcus's girlfriend Tanya were all in the living room. There were pizza boxes on the coffee table, and the television was on, but nobody was watching it. They were talking in the loud, excited way people talk when something good just happened. I came in and set my bag down and said, "Hey." My mom looked up. Something passed across her face. Something I had learned to read over 23 years. A decision. She had made a decision before I walked in the door. She said, "We need to talk to you." I sat down in the armchair across from the couch. Marcus would not look at me. Tanya was very focused on her pizza. My dad was looking at his hands. My mom said, "Your father and I have been thinking about this for a while. The house has gotten too small. Marcus and Tanya are serious, and they're going to need their own space. We think it makes sense for you to find your own place." I looked at her. I said, "I already have an apartment. I move in 6 weeks." She nodded like she already knew that. She said, "We think it would be better for everyone if you moved sooner." I asked her how much sooner. She said 2 days. I heard the words. My brain heard them clearly, but my body did something strange. My hands went cold. My chest went tight. I felt like I was looking at the room from somewhere outside of it. I said, 2 days. She said yes. I said, "Mom, graduation is in 6 weeks. My lease starts in 6 weeks. I have nowhere to go in 2 days." She said, "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." That was the sentence. That was the one I will carry for the rest of my life, said with a little smile. Said like a compliment that was not a compliment at all. Marcus finally spoke. He said, "Cora, we just think it'll be better." His voice was tight. He still would not look at me. Tanya was eating her pizza. My dad said, "We'll help you move your boxes." I stood up. I did not say anything. I walked to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed. I pressed my palms flat on my knees and I stared at the floor. The light in my room was yellow and warm, and the room felt like it was closing in slowly. I had 6 weeks until my lease started, 2 days until my parents changed the locks. I stayed very still. Then I heard my mom laugh at something in the living room, loud and easy, like the conversation had already been resolved and filed away, like I was already gone. And something in me went very quiet. Not sad, not angry, quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before something clear. I picked up my phone. I called my friend Diane. She answered on the second ring. I told her what happened in 1 or 2 sentences. She said, "Come here right now." I said I needed 1 more day. I needed to do something first. I stayed up until 2 in the morning. I was not packing. I was not crying. I was working. What nobody in that living room knew yet was what I had spent the last 4 months quietly putting together, and they were about to find out. But let me tell you the thing I had been sitting on, because it changes everything that comes next. 3 months before that Friday night, I had been cleaning out some boxes in the back of my closet. Old school papers, birthday cards, things from childhood. At the bottom of one box, I found a folder I had not opened since I was 15. It was the folder my grandma had given me the last time I saw her before she got sick. Inside was a single piece of paper. It was a letter she had written to me. It described the college fund she had set up. It gave the account name. It gave the name of the bank, and it gave the original amount she had deposited. It had her signature at the bottom. She had opened that account in my name, not my parents' name, mine. That letter sat in my hands for a long time. I read it twice. I sat on my closet floor with my back against the wall. My grandma's handwriting was small and careful, and she had drawn a little star next to my name at the top. I pressed my hand flat over the paper like I could feel her through it. Then I called the bank. It took 3 phone calls and 1 in-person visit. The account still existed. My name was still on it. The balance was not what my grandma had originally put in. It had been touched. But there was still $3,800 in it, and because my name was on the account as the beneficiary and I was now an adult, I had every legal right to it. Every single right. I withdrew that money the next morning. I did not tell anyone. I put it directly into my own account. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and I breathed for about 5 minutes before I started the engine. That was 3 months ago. Now I was sitting at my desk at 2 in the morning, with 2 days before my parents changed the locks, and I was opening my laptop. I pulled up the document I had been building. It started with my notebook, every amount, every date, every category. I had organized it by year, then by type. I had receipts photographed and attached. I had done this carefully and quietly over 4 months. I had not known exactly when I would need it. I had just known I would need it. I also had one other thing. A few weeks earlier, I had been dropping some paperwork off at the county records office for a class project. While I was there, I looked up something on a whim. The property records for our house on Fairfield Lane. It was public information. Anyone could look it up. What I found was that the house had been refinanced 2 years ago. The new monthly payment was listed, and the address used for a secondary contact on the filing was an address I recognized immediately. It was my grandma's old house, the one she left to my parents when she passed, the one they had sold 6 months after her death. That was not unusual on its own, but something else was. The original loan from when my parents first bought the house had a cosigner listed, my grandma. And when the refinancing happened, there was a letter on file releasing the cosigner's estate, which referenced the original promise attached to the loan. A promise that a portion of any financial benefit from the property would pass to the primary family heir. I am the primary family heir. I had an appointment with a housing attorney the following week. I had already told her what I found. She said the letter was worth reviewing. She said I had a real question worth asking. That night at my desk, I typed a letter. It was addressed to my mother and my father. It was 3 paragraphs long. It listed every dollar I had contributed to the household over 4.5 years. It listed the account my grandma had opened in my name. It referenced the property records and the letter on file at the county office. It was not a threat. It was not angry. It was just a very organized, very clear record of facts. At the bottom, I wrote one line. I will be vacating the property within 48 hours as requested. I expect the matter of my financial contributions and the outstanding account balance to be addressed before I do. I have retained legal counsel and have documented everything. I printed it. I folded it. I put it in an envelope with my name on the front in my own handwriting. I slid it under my mother's bedroom door at 2:14 in the morning, the same way she had slid her note under mine. Then I went to bed. I woke up the next morning to the sound of raised voices downstairs. My parents were in the kitchen. I could hear them clearly through the floor. My mom's voice was sharp. My dad's was low and urgent. I could not make out every word, but I heard my name several times. I heard the word lawyer at least twice. I got up, I showered. I got dressed slowly. I came downstairs. They were both standing in the kitchen. My mom was holding my letter. Her face was a color I had not seen before. A kind of pale that sat under her usual expression like something underneath the surface had shifted. My dad looked at me. He looked like a man who had just understood something he had been avoiding for a very long time. My mom said, "What is this?" It was not a question. It was said flat, like the word this was something she was holding at arm's length. I said, "It's what it says it is." She said, "You're threatening us." I said, "I'm documenting facts. That's not a threat." She put the letter down on the counter. She crossed her arms. She said, "You've been planning this." I said, "I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." My dad sat down at the kitchen table. He put his face in his hands for just a moment. Then he looked up and said, "Cora, the fund." He stopped. He looked at my mom. She was not looking at him. She was looking at me and her jaw was tight. He said, "We should have told you about the fund." I said, "I know." He said, "We were going to pay it back." I looked at him for a long moment. He believed that when he said it. I could see that he believed it. That was somehow the worst part. I said, "It doesn't matter what you were going to do. It matters what you did." My mom's voice came back sharp. She said, "You have no idea what it costs to run this house. You have no idea what we've given up for you." I said, "I kept a record. I know exactly what it costs." She picked up the letter again. She read it. Her eyes moved fast across the page. Then she set it back down. The kitchen was very quiet except for the refrigerator hum and a car passing outside. She said, "You can't do this." I said, "I already did." Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had clearly been listening. His face was unreadable. Tanya was behind him, not quite in the room. My dad said, "Cora, let's talk about this, please." I said, "I'm happy to talk. My attorney is available next Thursday." My mom made a sound, not quite a word, just a breath with something behind it. I pick. D up my keys. I said I was going to Diane's for the day to start moving some things over. I said I would be back for my boxes. I said I hoped we could handle everything without it going further than it needed to go. Then I walked out the front door. I stood on the front step for just a second. The morning was cool. The oak tree was still there. I could hear a bird somewhere in it. I took one breath. Then I walked to my car and I drove away. The attorney meeting happened on the following Thursday. My mom and dad came. They brought no attorney of their own, which told me something. They sat across from me and my attorney, a woman named Iris who had short gray hair and a very calm voice, and they looked like two people who had been running for a long time and had finally stopped. Iris laid out the situation clearly. The account my grandma had opened was legally mine. The $3,800 I had already withdrawn was properly mine, and there was no dispute there. The contribution record I had kept was not a legal instrument on its own, but it was a strong foundation for a civil claim if one were needed. The property letter at the county office was less clear-cut and would require more research, but it was real, and it was on file, and it was not nothing. My parents sat quietly through all of this. At the end, my mom said, "What does she want?" Iris looked at me. I said, "I want the $3,800 to stay in my account with no dispute. I want a written acknowledgement that the contributions I made to the household are recognized. And I want to finish my degree and attend my graduation without any interference." My mom was quiet for a long moment. My dad nodded almost immediately. My mom said, "Fine." Just like that. Fine. The same voice she used when she was done with a conversation she had not wanted to have. We signed a simple agreement. It was 3 pages. It took 20 minutes. I drove home after. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex, the one I was moving into in 4 weeks, and I looked at the building. It was ordinary, red brick. A small balcony on the second-floor unit that was going to be mine. A tree in the parking lot that would drop leaves in October. I cried in that parking lot. Not hard, just quiet and steady like a tide going out. I had not cried the night she slid the note under my door. I had not cried the morning I slid mine under hers. I had not cried in the attorney's office. I cried in the parking lot of the place that was about to be mine, and it felt like the truest thing I had done in months. I moved into my apartment on June 4th. Deanne helped me carry boxes. We ordered takeout and sat on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet, just boxes and a sleeping bag and the lamp from my old room. We ate fried rice out of the containers, and she made me laugh until I had to put my food down. I graduated 3 weeks later. It was a Saturday morning, and the sky was that specific shade of pale blue that only happens early in summer. I walked across the stage in the big gymnasium, and I shook the dean's hand, and I looked out at the rows of people, and I found Diane's face immediately. She was standing up. She was clapping with her arms above her head. My parents came. They sat in the back. My mom had a card in her hand that she gave to me after. Inside was a check for $500 and a note in her handwriting that said, "We are proud of you." I held the card for a while. I put it in my bag. I did not know what to do with it yet. I still don't, fully. My dad hugged me. He held on for a second longer than I expected. He did not say anything. Sometimes people don't have the words, and that's the most honest thing about them. Marcus texted me that night. He said, "Congrats, Cor." That was all. I wrote back, "Thanks, Mark." That was all. We have not spoken since then in any real way. I don't know what we are to each other now. I am still figuring that out. I started my job in late June, environmental consulting. I work mostly on water quality projects in the region. I drive out to sites. I test samples. I write reports. I come home to my apartment and I make dinner, and sometimes I sit on my small balcony with a cup of tea and I watch the parking lot tree and I feel something I don't have a perfect word for. It's not happiness exactly. It's more like the feeling of having solid ground under your feet after a long time of not being sure if the ground was real. The $3,800 is still in my savings account. I have not spent $1 of it. I am not sure why exactly. It feels like something I need to leave untouched for now. My grandma kept a promise. I want to honor that in a way I haven't worked out yet. The apartment is mine. The furniture I have is mostly second-hand, and I love it. I have a bookshelf I found at a thrift store that has a crack in the back panel that I fixed with wood glue. I have a rug my grandma made that I kept all these years in a box in my closet. It's on my living room floor now. I wail across it every morning. I think about the night my mom slid that note under my door sometimes. The specific sound of paper on hardwood. The way I lay in the dark for a second before I reached down to pick it up. The number at the bottom. I think about the fact that she thought that note would end things, that it would scatter me, that I would have no move left to make. She did not know about the notebook. She did not know about the bank letter. She did not know about the folder in my closet, or the county record's office, or Iris, with the short gray hair who spoke in a calm voice, and laid everything out on a table like she had all the time in the world. My mother is not a villain in a story. She is a complicated person who made choices that hurt me and who, when faced with the record of those choices, said fine and signed her name and went home. I don't hate her. I don't spend energy on hating her. I spend energy on the water quality reports and the second-hand furniture and the rug my grandma made. Some losses you grieve, some truths you just carry, some things you don't need to explain to anyone. What I know for certain is this. The house on Fairfield Lane is still there. The green front door, the oak tree in the backyard, it is my parents' house. It was never actually mine. But this apartment, this is mine. Nobody slipped a note under the door to give me this. I earned it with a notebook and a folder in a closet and a phone call to a bank and a woman named Iris who charged me $400 for 3 hours of her time and was worth every cent. I earned it the way my grandma knew I would. She put my name on that account for a reason. I think she always knew I'd need it. You just felt something that most people carry quietly for years without ever saying out loud. These stories exist because that feeling deserves a place to land. If this channel has ever made you feel less alone in your own family story, hit subscribe and stay here, because this community was built for people who know exactly what it means to be the one who always showed up and was the last to be seen. You are not invisible here.